Welcome to Baby Loss Talk. I am your host, Janelle Adams, a fellow baby loss mom who created the show to help remove the stigma, shame, and loneliness of losing a pregnancy or infant by sharing real stories, advice, and resources. Welcome to episode 11 of Baby Loss Talk. Today I am very excited because we have our very first couple on the show, Erica and Brandon. Say hey, guys.
Hey, everyone.
All right. So as usual, we're just gonna get to know you a little bit and then jump into your story. So tell us a little bit about you guys. I would love to know how you met because I love stories and all that stuff. So whatever you guys feel comfortable sharing about yourselves, take it away.
All right. You gonna go first?
You go first.
All right. Well, I'm Erica McAfee. And I guess about me, I like to say I'm an engineer by day and a podcast host by night. So I am an environmental manager for a big chicken company. You know, you can figure out which one. There's only like 3 that are big out there, so you can figure out which one. And then, of course, I host a podcast that I had Janelle on. She was on episode 4.
Yes,
showing my name.
Podcast.
A grief and pregnancy loss podcast. And I'm a wife and a mom and a friend, and we just love blogging and social media. That's what we do. That's what I love doing.
I'm Brandon McAfee. I am the pastor of the Great Gaskins Chapel, African Methodist Episcopal Church on the Eastern Shore of Virginia and on Nancock, Virginia to be exact. I'm a pastor by day, pastor by night, pastor in the middle of the morning. I'm also an Uber pastor. I drive Uber on the side, and I find that most of my Uber trips, not most, but some of my Uber trips turn out to be ministry sessions where I'm ministering to people who are in need or going through some trial or tribulation.
I was just going to ask you that because if I have a pastor in my Uber, I'm going to just start telling you all my business and asking you all.
Yeah, he has stories for days.
I've had some of those where people have confided in me and, you know, looking for advice. And by the time the car ride ends, it's, where's your church located at? So God is using it as a blessing to really minister to people out there. And I find that people are more apt to tell total strangers their business because more likely they'll never see me again.
Right.
So that's that. Similar to Erica, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a friend, I'm a brother, I'm a lover. I'm all of those things. And so, again, it is a pleasure to be on the podcast. On the video cast, a little bit about how we met.
Go ahead. You can start that.
We were, I'm sure. Well, we met.
We met on
Facebook.
We met on
Facebook.
Oh yeah, we met on Facebook. But of course, it's not as I guess Facebook is not as popular. Social media in general is not as popular as it is now as it was back then. Mm-hmm. But still similar to today. I'm sure you have a lot of friends. We all have a lot of friends who were friends with on Facebook, and we have no idea how we became their friend, when we became their friend, and why we became their friend. Mm-hmm. But my wife and I, we were friends on Facebook, and I just remember seeing some of her photos and posts on my timeline, and it wasn't called slide through your DM back then. But I slid in her inbox. And, I was just, talking to her, and at the time, just complimenting her and just kind of, very kind of above ground, above board kind of, conversation. And at the time, she shared with me that she was doing an internship in New Jersey at the time. And so, that summer, we made her talk maybe twice. And I think she let me know when she got back to Richmond from her internship. At the time, she was an undergraduate student at VCU, and I was a seminary student at Virginia Union University. And she came back in August, and we went on a few dates and kind of just really hit it off really fast, and really feeling each other. I was in school. I got cold feet. This kind of idea of having a relationship, and didn't feel like I was ready. And so we
almost
dated.
lost me.
We dated from probably August of 2008 until on and off to about May of 2009. And she left to go to start her life. She got a job with a big oil company in Texas, so she went to work there. And we probably didn't talk really for about maybe a year.
Wow.
Maybe some more. And then when I tried to kind of initiate conversation and contact again, she wasn't having it. She wasn't having it. And then we started dating again in 2010 of December. I went out there to Texas where she was living at the time just to spend Christmas with her and New Year's, and we just started dating. We were just kind of like, we're going to try to do this, right? And we did it, and we got engaged on July 16th of 2011 in Northern Virginia. It was really
in Maryland at the harbor, National Harbor. Yeah.
We got married the following year, and here we are now, 5 years later.
Yes.
And so, Langston Hughes wrote in the poem "Mother to Son," life has not been a crystal skater.
It's not.
Wow.
We've had our journey as it relates to trying to rear children, not rear children, but bear children. And even rearing our son Maxwell it's been a journey. But by God's grace, we're still here. We're still in love, and we're here talking to you.
Yes, we
on
are.
this great video cast.
Yes.
So.
Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing that. Like I said, I'm a sucker for like love stories and how people meet and all that. So that was awesome. I'm glad everything worked out and all that. And now you guys are together and you get engaged and you get married. What was your conversation like about having kids? Was it something that you both wanted, or that you guys decided you would want to try right away or wait? Like, what was your conversation like around family planning? I know, like me and my husband I wanted to wait till I got married at 22, and I was like, I'm not having kids till I'm 30.
Oh, wow.
He was like, no. So, like, our conversation was very strange. So what was your conversation like when it came?
So I think I was just like you. So we got married. I was 26, 27, whatever. So I forgot what age I was. But anyhow, we got married. I wanted to wait like a couple years. But Brandon and I actually went to the Justice of the Peace a few months before we actually had a wedding. So in January of 2012, we actually went to the Justice of the Peace and got married, officially married. And then ended up having our wedding in May of 2012. So between January and May, we got pregnant.
Oh.
So we found out we were expecting in March of 2012. So that's when I found out I was expecting our first son, Brandon Jr. And it was no family planning at that point. We were in it. Like I was gonna have to fit in a wedding dress, and I was pregnant. Almost 3 months pregnant, and we were kind of in it. So we were just kind of sold on, like, okay, yeah, we're in it. We're planning for a baby boy. I mean, we went through the whole planning process. We started at that time we had moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and we started to go through the looking for a house. We actually built a house from the ground up. We were doing the whole 9 yards, getting everything we needed for the baby. Of course, we got married, and then we went through that whole process. And I think we ended up moving into our house in October. Was it October of 2012? October of 2012. And then Maxwell. I'm saying Maxwell because Maxwell's in the room crying. But Brandon Jr. ended up coming in November 29th.
With your first pregnancy with Brandon Jr., was it like a normal pregnancy, or were there any complications that led you to realize that things might turn out a little differently than you planned? Like, what was that pregnancy like?
So no, so I will say first, during the first trimester, you know, when they do all the genetic testing and things.
Mhm.
So he did have markers for Down syndrome when we initially did the genetic testing. So whenever they have markers, they go back and do like an additional ultrasound, and then they can do other screenings where they can go in and it's so high tech now. They can use your DNA to extract their DNA to see if they have any chromosome issues. I mean, there's a couple different methods that they use, but we ended up finding out, you know, towards the end of the first trimester, going into the second trimester, that of course he didn't have any additional markers for Down syndrome. So we were clear from there. Throughout the rest of the pregnancy, at the time I was a shift manager, so I was working shift work. And if you know anything about shift work, it's taxing on your body. So you're working 12, 14-hour days. Some days you're working on your day shift, some days you're on night shift, and you're going back and forth all throughout the month. So I pretty much worked that way my entire pregnancy.
Wow.
So it wasn't a stressor, but it could have been, I guess, looking back on it, it could have been a stressor, and it could have caused some issues with the pregnancy if I, you know, going forward. But other than that, we didn't have any other major issues throughout the pregnancy, up until the end, where, you know, you're getting closer to 40 weeks. They start testing you, make sure that you're not having a lot of protein in your urine. And at that time I did, and that's when they induced me. And I got induced at 39 weeks and 5 days with BJ. And we went through that process. So I can continue on if you want me to with the whole.
Sure, whatever you feel comfortable.
So yeah, I got induced. We went in that night. Of course, typically they start with like a Foley bulb catheter. And then from there, they start your Pitocin. So then you go through the whole induction process. They'll start your contractions. You start going through labor. I got to 10 centimeters. And at that time, when we knew that we were going to be admitted, my mom in Virginia started to drive down to Charlotte. And then that next morning, my grandparents drove down. So it was my grandparents, my mom, and my stepfather came down too, right? I think it was all of them, just those four. I believe so. I can't remember exactly now. He can remember more, so it's good to have him here. It was an out of body experience after a certain point. But once I got to 10 centimeters, I pushed for probably about an hour and a half, and BJ just would not come down through my pelvic area. So at that time they were changing shifts at the hospital. 7 p.m. shift was coming in, the night shift was coming in, and the new doctor came in, and she was like, well, go ahead and try to push one more time for me. She, you know, the other doctor said, you can't, it's not really happening. I just want to see it for myself. And she was like, I think we're going to have to do emergency C-section. So then they're going ahead and they're prepping me for the emergency C-section. I'm pretty calm at this point. I'm just kind of tired. I'm like, I'm done pushed all this time. I'm just ready for this to be over with. Like, I want to hold this baby. So they went on ahead and wheeled me in. I think at that time they may have given him scrubs or what have you to put in. And I just remember getting into the OR. And if you've ever been in an OR, you know, for those who've had a C-section, it's just like it is on Grey's Anatomy, if we're going to use an example, where you have lights everywhere. You know, depending on the hospital, if it's a teaching hospital, you have people everywhere. And I just remember, you know, them putting the curtain up over me and then starting to feel a lot of movement, because of course if you're with the epidural, you're numb from the waist below, but you can still feel them moving and pushing and tugging you. So I felt them, and the doctor was like, you know, we're going to go ahead and we're cutting you right now. And can you feel anything? I'm like, no, but I can feel you moving me. So then they went on ahead and cut me open and then pulled the baby out. And I guess typically, you know, whenever they do a C-section, they do kind of hold the baby up so you can see the baby. So they held BJ up, and I actually got a glimpse of him. And I was like, why isn't he not crying? You know, I whispered to Brandon, because I think Brandon was on my left side. And I was like, why is he not crying? And at that time, I guess they whisked him over to where the little holding area was for the baby to be. And they were surrounded by nurses. And I think there was a different doctor, maybe it was a pediatrician that was in there. And I just remember him saying like, oh, like cussing, like what, like what's going, something, it was the anesthesiologist. He was like, something's not right. Like something's not right. So that's all I remember. Like, that's all I remember from the room. And maybe he probably can remember more because he was in there. But that's all I remember, because at that point, I'm just like, you know, and maybe it was the Holy Spirit. And you know, I'm thinking about it. It was the Holy Spirit that came back on me and was like, you're going to be okay. You know, you're going to be okay. And that's all I remember from that point. I know that they rolled me out of the room and we went into the recovery area. Mm-hmm. And the nurse was in there, the nurse that was with me, that was from my actual room. She was standing in the recovery area waiting for me. And I just remember her face. When I asked her, I was like, I want to see my baby. You know, where's my baby? He's good. You know, do we need to go to the NICU or what have you? Mm-hmm. And she said she got a phone call. And I guess it was the doctor calling her, telling her that the baby had passed away. And you could see her face. It went from smiling and it completely, her demeanor completely changed. So she was like, you know, the doctor's going to come out here and tell you about your baby. And I'm like, the doctor's telling me about my baby? Like, what's wrong with my baby? Like, you know, it shouldn't be any issues. So at that time, the doctor came out. All I remember is my mom. I see my mom and my stepfather and my grandparents behind them. And then the doctor came in, and I don't know if it was another doctor behind him, but the doctor told us that our son had passed away, that his lungs would not oxygenate. And it's nothing that they could have found in a ultrasound, because of course, when the baby is inside of you, mm-hmm. you are supplying their oxygen through your placenta. Mm-hmm. So, you know, their lungs don't oxygenate until they get into the real world, when they're actually, and that's a sign of them crying. That's why you normally listen for their cries, because that means you know that they're breathing fine. So at that point, I think I blacked out. Like I said, I don't remember a whole bunch, and I remember screaming and crying and just being in a state of shock, because here I was, you know, 30 minutes earlier trying to have a baby or push a baby out, and then they did a C-section, and I went through this huge abdominal surgery, and then now I don't even have a baby to hold in my hands that's breathing. So at that point, I asked for them how much did he weigh? You know, could I see him? So at that point, they brought BJ out, and they let me hold him, and we were able to do, they're able to weigh him. And I have all of those pictures, because I have all those pictures on my phone of him being weighed, all of his footprints and handprints. And at that hospital in Charlotte, they had a really good bereavement team, where they were able to give us molds of his feet, and a lot of a personalized photography session. So we were able to get professional photography or photos of him. Mm-hmm. And we were just in mourning. I think we were just in shock, and we were just like, you know, everyone was trying to make sure I was okay through the process, but I think I was still in shock that, you know, like, what did I just go through? Like, I just went through labor. Where's my baby? You know, what happened to my baby? So that was our first loss with our son, BJ.
And Brandon, can I ask, what was your initial reaction? Because this is, like I was telling Erica, this is our first time getting a male perspective on the show. I know, like, I've talked to my husband, and for a long time, for a few years, he couldn't really like put his like words together of like how he felt during the process. It was just all about like making sure I was okay. And then me, you know, or I'm sure like you can see with your wife, it's just like, you're just in shock yourself, and there's so much going on that it's like, we don't even get a chance to really check in with you guys sometimes. So what was your initial reaction or your initial feeling when you found out that BJ passed?
I was in shock.
Mm-hmm.
I really just like, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Man, I was devastated. I was in shock. I just remember on Facebook updating posts like, you know, in 20 minutes my son's gonna come. You know, just kind of like an hour. Just kind of these posts like kind of just let people know, you know, it's about to come. It's about to happen. You know, getting closer. So I was excited. I mean, I was having a boy, and so for a father having his first son be a junior, I was ecstatic. And so for that to happen, I was just in total shock. Like, I just couldn't fathom it. And for me, I guess, being a pastor, a man who, tries his best to serve God and to serve God's people. I think, like, God, I'm working for you. I'm trying to do my best to be faithful to you. And it's kind of like, this is how you repay me.
Yeah,
like,
what happened?
kind of like what happened, And so I was just in total disbelief and shock, and it hurt.
Yeah. What did the grieving process look like for you guys as a couple? Did you guys do like counseling together? Did Erica go by herself? Did you go by yourself? Like, what did the next few months look like for you guys?
So we did a few counseling sessions, not that much after the first loss. We did more counseling. We started really counseling after the second loss, but after the first loss, it wasn't really a lot of counseling.
I don't think we really liked that counseling either, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What it was.
Yeah, it's challenging to find the right counselor. I feel like that's usually the thing that like deters people away from it, is just like not finding that right person that connects.
Yeah.
Especially if they haven't been through that kind of loss, it's really hard for them to like counsel you, because the whole time you're just looking at them like, okay, you don't even get this. Like, you have no idea what this feels like. So
yeah, it was kind of like, just when we went for a couple times and that was it. For Erica, I think Erica took 3 months off.
I did. I still had my full maternity leave, and
6 weeks.
it was probably about 12 weeks off when you after it all added up. So I did. I took the entire time off. I did a lot of moping, a lot of very, very much depressed during that time frame. And it was around the holidays, because he was born on November 29th. So, probably 2, 3, 4 days beforehand, I had cooked Thanksgiving dinner. We were eating Thanksgiving with his grandmother, because his grandmother lives in Charlotte. And everybody was waiting for BJ to come, because they were going to come down for Thanksgiving, and he wasn't here yet. They were going to wait till he came, and then came down. So we had to go through the holidays. Our first holiday as husband and wife, really, and then losing a child. So it was tough for me, because we were going through that whole process. So it was a lot of moping, a lot of depression. Just a lot of just trying to be surrounded by family and just in love during that time frame while I was out of work until I went back to work.
Yeah, it was a week after Thanksgiving, and again, and I took a week off. I went back to work, and so that was hard for me just to kind of go to work. And at the time I was working at Target. Target, I was working a day shift, so you have all type of moms in there with their babies crying, and just the cry of a baby will just take me to a place where I'm like over with. I mean, I think one time I couldn't just deal with it. I would cry, and it was hard. It was just hard emotionally, hard talking about. People want to, talk to you and offer their condolences, and just the fact to think about it, it was bad. And I think one of my coworkers, his wife was pregnant, and they might have had a baby like a week or 2 weeks later. So everyone can kind of congratulate him, and I'm thinking like, why him? No, not me. It hurt. At the time, we were attending a church in Charlotte, and the husband and wife, the pastor and his wife, they were from my home church in Maryland. And I just remember as a child hearing this pastor preach at my home church, and coming back to raise money for his daughter. His daughter had cancer at the time. This is probably back in like 96, 97. I was in middle school. And just hearing this story about this pastor and his daughter, and just him taking his daughter up to New York and getting all these expensive cancer treatments. Fast forward, to maybe 10 years later, their daughter dies. She the fight with cancer, just she passed away. I won't say she lost a battle, but she died. And then fast forward maybe 5 more years, we're in Charlotte. And so, and again, this husband and his wife and their family are living in Charlotte, pastoring in Charlotte. And so I just remember this. So we were attending their church. And so, I had no idea I'll ever move to Charlotte. I had no idea that I'll ever lose a child. And just the fact that we were in Charlotte and when we lost a child, I knew somebody, you know, from my home church, and they had a similar experience losing a child. Matter of fact, they did. They lost 2 twin girls at birth.
They did.
Also,
yeah.
they lost 2 twin girls. Then they lost a teenage daughter
right,
to cancer. So
yeah.
just to have that, I feel like God just kind of went ahead of me. It's like, okay, you know, in 2012, you're going to go through this experience. But I'm going to make sure that you're not going to be alone during this experience. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to send some people there, you know, that can minister to you and be a source of comfort and you know, and strength for you. And so the husband ended up preaching at my son's funeral. So that's kind of this. I know God was in the midst of everything, you know, making sure that we will be all right. Tough experience.
Thing too, like I remember that was like one of the first things. I was just like, God, like, whoa, like we're on the same team here. Like, what happened, you know? But then it's like when you do look back on it, you realize that he's always there. It's like, you know, just because we're followers of God doesn't mean that we're not going to go through bad things or go through challenging things, I'll say. But it's like he'll always make sure that even then that, you know, he's there, you know, just to like remind you like, okay, like, you know, keep going, don't give up the faith. Because I definitely had a moment where I was just like, this doesn't make sense. You know, I don't know if you guys went through anything like that. Obviously, I, you know, snapped back into my senses, but, you know, depression will, you know, sometimes just trick you into thinking all kinds of stuff and feeling like you're alone when you're not alone. You know, even if you have tons of family and friends around, sometimes you'll just feel like you're just in this by yourself. Some couples will feel like that even with their spouse, even though their spouse is going through it with them, they still feel very much alone.
And I can definitely attest to that. I think, you know, we grieve differently.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to just kind of try to, you know, move on.
He was ready to move on. Brandon was like,
going to the
gym. You know, let's go to the mall. Let's go, trying to get me out of my funk. Let's go to the mall. Let's go look at cars. Let's go.
Yeah.
We were doing a whole bunch of different things.
And meanwhile, Erica is just in bed, like, listen, like, sir, no.
So we definitely grieve differently.
We do.
And I think that's really important to understand. And another reason why I'm so happy to have a couple on here, because we have to be patient with each other. We take these vows for better or for worse. And then it's like, unfortunately, losing a baby, losing a child, it is, I mean, one of the worst things you could possibly go through as a couple. But because men and women grieve so differently, unfortunately, there's so many couples that don't survive this. And then speaking to that, you guys go through this loss, and then did you guys then talk about family planning for the next baby, or did you just leave it in God's hands and just like let it happen again?
Well, I will say this, that I think that when you lose, I just felt so empty. Like I felt like I left the hospital empty-handed.
Did you feel like you had to have a baby like right that second again?
No, yeah, well, not necessarily. I knew it was gonna take a while for us to probably try to have another baby, but I knew that once I was ready in my heart and mind, and that he was ready, that I wanted to try again. I did want to try again. So at that point, to try again immediately. No, I did not. I did not.
I mean, when I say immediately, like immediately, like when her body,
when my body was healed
after the 6 weeks.
No, he did not. He's trying to be funny. No, I did not. We waited how many months? Maybe 4, 5 months. Was it even that?
He's like, no.
we lost the baby in November.
And we waited probably until March, April-ish.
So basically, we lost the baby in December, so 6 weeks in December.
He's trying to do the math. We waited about 4 or 5 months. We tried again, and I never had an issue getting pregnant. So we got pregnant probably the first month we started actually trying, and the first day. And so we got pregnant again, and we were monitored closely, a little bit more closely on this pregnancy, just to make sure, I mean, whatever they saw in the ultrasound. So let me back up and say that with my son, that we ended up we got an autopsy on him, and the autopsy came back not really showing anything genetically that was wrong with him. It's just how his lungs developed over time while he was in the womb. So we knew that it wasn't a genetic issue that was going to happen with another pregnancy. So with this pregnancy, you know, it was just more for me, you know, me going in more often just to get additional monitoring and things. And with I did get genetic testing done on her during the first trimester, and then they were able to tell us the sex of the baby. So we knew at 13 weeks, 12 or 13 weeks, we were having a girl. And we just continued going through the pregnancy, going through the monthly checkups. I think at this time I asked to be moved to a different position at work. Mm-hmm. So when I went back to work and I found out I was pregnant, I was still working shift work. I asked, went to HR, you know, sat down with my supervisor and was like, you know, I want to, you know, are there other opportunities in the facility that there's a need for? You know, this is my experience. This is what I bring to the table. It's one of those kind of career conversations, either it makes you or breaks you. So I basically did that, and they moved me into a different role. So I was moved into a completely different role when I actually found out I was pregnant, was able to get off of shift work and work a normal 9 to 5. So I thought I was in smooth sailing. I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be good. I'm not gonna have to work shift work anymore. I can be home by 5. I'm good. This is gonna be really good for this pregnancy. So with the new role, I had a training I had to go to. So I went to a training in July in Wilmington, North Carolina. Drove to Wilmington. It's probably about 2.5, 3 hours away from Charlotte, and started to have some spotting. So I had some spotting. I called Brandon. I'm like, what is going on? I don't know why I have spotting going on. I never had spotting with our first pregnancy. Uh-huh. So then he was just like, go to the ER. So I went to the ER. The ER checked me out. They didn't do a vaginal, like a pelvic exam, but they did bring a Doppler in just to check the heartbeat and everything. They just said, okay, well, I think you're just experiencing some second trimester bleeding. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, okay. They were like, well, when you get back home, make sure you set up an appointment with your OBGYN mm-hmm. so that they can see if this bleeding persists. So this training was like 2 or 3 days. This was probably like a Tuesday that I actually went to the ER. And then I think I drove back home on that Thursday. That Thursday night I drove back home. That Thursday night, I think I woke back up that early Friday morning in pain. Like I was in labor pains. Like I know what labor pains feel like because I've experienced them before, but I had completely back labor. Like I knew what it felt like. So, and then I was bleeding more. It was more of a real, it was blood. It's not like spotting. It was like blood. Yeah. So I was like, okay, we got to go to the hospital. So as soon as we got in the hospital, they checked me out and they found that, you know, my cervix was completely open and they could actually see the amniotic sac coming out. So the baby was coming out. There was nothing at that point they can do, especially in that position when your cervix is already open. Even if it's open slightly, they possibly could go in and do a cerclage. But at that point, it was open and it was soft.
So, how many weeks were you at this point?
I was 18 weeks at that time. 18 weeks along. So I basically had to have a baby at that point. The doctors came in the room and it just told me that, and at that time, was it the same doctor? No, it was a different doctor.
It was a different, so the doctor that delivered me
with my son BJ.
The next day, the doctor was on call
follow up with her, right?
And so this go around, the doctor delivered her. This time was the doctor who followed up with her the next day.
Right.
If that makes sense.
That makes sense, yeah. So we basically saw the same kind of 2 OBGYNs the entire time through our pretty much our childbearing process, because they were rooting for us throughout this whole time. So they came in. He was like, you know, you're gonna have a baby. You're gonna have to go through labor to deliver her. So I went through the whole labor process. I think I labored. got an epidural, and then I ended up actually vaginally delivering her because she was so small. Mm-hmm. So I had her at 18 weeks in a few days. And I remember this vividly because this was around the time of the Trayvon Martin case, right? I just remember being surrounded by family during that time because we had just experienced the loss, 6-7 months prior. Mm-hmm. And then having another loss, so close together. Everyone came to us, everyone drove near and far to Charlotte to be with us during that time frame. And I think I am right because I remember us watching it on TV. He's gonna go Google it, of course, because that's what he does. I do remember. I think it was because I remember just it being a somber time for all of us because not only I lost a baby, but somebody got shot on TV, mm-hmm. and everybody, the whole country, the African American community was in mourning, and that's how I felt, at least at the time. Another mom lost her child, mm-hmm. whether it was to gun violence or, in my case, I lost a child in a second trimester miscarriage. So all our family came around, they surrounded us. And in that time, we was like, okay, we need to find a counselor that we really like. We really need to work this thing, this grief. See, I was right. I knew I was right. So we were like, we gotta really work this grief thing out. We really just need to get in the word. We really just need to get with somebody and just talk.
Because those are two pretty big losses to have so close together. I mean, okay, so take me to what is you guys' like initial reaction? Like, were you just in disbelief all over again? Were you angry? Like what?
All of the above. I'm like, God, I know you just not. How could I go through this again?
Yeah, I was in disbelief because I felt like, okay, God, maybe one time, but never twice.
Never twice. Not 2 times in a row.
So I was just like, this is impossible that I can go through this twice.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely still angry, still upset.
We were sad. We were all over the place, just mad. All those emotions. So we got with a new counselor and sat down with him and started to go to him, and he started to work things out within, just marital counseling, and then the grief stuff.
That's a lot on a marriage, and you guys are still newlyweds at that point.
Newlyweds at the time in a new city, pretty much by ourselves. His grandmother was our family there, but it was pretty much just me and him. So we had to work it out. We had to go through counseling and just work out the differences between the two of us, how we grieve differently, and then get to a place where we both were comfortable to talk about trying again if we wanted to try again. So I don't know how long we waited this time. Maybe it was a little longer. Maybe
this time was a little longer.
It was a little longer, I'm sure.
I'm sure it was a lot.
Because it was a lot to deal with. So we waited a little longer, and then we tried again with our to have our son Maxwell that we have now. So
okay, and what was that pregnancy like for you guys?
With Maxwell?
Yeah.
Ooh,
the doctor.
so yeah, we were.
I could just imagine the paranoia.
Pregnancy was a bunch of I had a bunch. So it was the same OBGYN office, which is very difficult when you've lost a child. So anytime you lost a child, you go back 6 weeks or 4 weeks for your checkup, and you're going back to that same office where you were pregnant. You're seeing all these other pregnant women, and you're seeing all these women who came back with their babies, and that's just.
How did that make you? Yeah, tell me how that made you feel, because
So the nurses knew. I knew all the nurses. They all knew my face. So between those checkups between both losses, they brought me through the back door. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have to go through the lobby, through the front to see all of these. See, they were very, very cognizant on feelings and things. And that's why I was very appreciative of my OBGYN. And the reason why I didn't change, because they were very cognizant of that. They didn't want me to go through the lobby. They were like, okay, we're going to bring you up the elevator. You're going to come through the back side door that the nurses go down, and we're going to put you right in one of the rooms. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't ask for any more than what they did for me when it comes to that. And then, like I said, we saw the same 2 OBGYNs. So they both were kind of working together to ensure that we had a successful pregnancy this third go round. So When I went in for like a preconception visit. So I actually went in before we got pregnant and was just like, okay, it was probably when I went in for like my annual checkup or whatever, and I was just like, okay, so these are all my questions I have. So really, what do I need to do to make sure that this pregnancy is going to be successful? So, we talked about, getting a cerclage because I was diagnosed with the incompetent cervix with my daughter, my second pregnancy. So we talked about possibly getting a cerclage or monitoring my cervix more closely through this pregnancy. So when it got time to where it was starting to open because of the pressure of the baby, that they would actually go in and physically stitch me up. So we talked about that, and then they answer all of my other crazy questions that I had just because of the fear and anxiety I had about trying to carry another child to full term throughout the pregnancy. So once we got pregnant, I went in, we got our checkup, our 6 weeks in checkup once I found out I was pregnant. And then we went pretty much every 2 or 3 weeks after I found out I was pregnant. I went to the OB. He wasn't joking. We went to the OBGYN quite often. And then once I got to 12 weeks, they started monitoring my cervix more closely. And I actually went to a maternal fetal medicine specialist, like a completely different doctor at a different hospital. And he monitored my cervix closely too. So we got up until about 16 weeks and they started seeing some shortening of my cervix. And they were like, all right, we're going to wait another week. I went in for another week and they were like, okay, we're getting close to the point where we're going to go ahead and schedule surgery. So I think it was around almost 19 weeks when I had my cerclage place with Maxwell. It actually was around Mother's Day because I remember my mom coming down from Chesapeake. She drove down in the middle of the night. Like I think my appointment was at like 8:00 in the morning or something crazy like that. And she had got there like right in time to see me getting wheeled back into the OR because that's a surgery. I mean, I don't know if people really know that that's a surgery. Like you're literally getting put to sleep and they're literally going in and stitching you up and just praying that they don't tear your amniotic sac when they're doing that. So I did have some bleeding after that. The bleeding went away after a few days because that's just normal when they touch anything down there. And then the stitch held throughout the rest of the pregnancy. They still continue to monitor it every 2 to 3 weeks. Up until I had another training class. See, I felt like I never could go to training because training, I had bad experiences. And I up until this year, I had issues with going to training for work because I'm like, is something bad gonna happen? So I went to another training. This training was local for my new position I was in. And I started feeling uneasy. And it wasn't labor pains because I know what labor pains feel like. It was just something different. Like the baby, like he wasn't moving as much or he was just really hard in one place. So it got to a point where I was like literally wrenching over in the bathroom at the training place. And I was like, oh no, I got to go to the hospital. So I called Brandon. I was like, let me go home and try to sleep it off. Maybe it's just me being uneasy or uncomfortable. And then I was like, okay, Brandon, you got to come home. Like I got to go to the hospital. So I waited for him to get home. He drove me to the hospital. I think we arrived at the hospital on August 19th at like 1:45, maybe 1:50. Maxwell was born at like 2:19.
Whoa.
That's how fast they took me in. So I went in.
How many weeks were you when he was born?
I was 32 weeks along when Maxwell came. So he was a preemie. And what was happening and that uneasiness that I was feeling was my placenta completely detaching from our uterus. So I had a full, complete placenta abruption during that pregnancy. And it's the reason why Maxwell he was born without oxygen. They had to resuscitate him at birth. And it's the reason why he is disabled now. He has cerebral palsy and a lot of other special needs. That's a whole nother podcast to talk about us being special needs parents.
Yeah.
But it is, he's a blessing. You know, he's what we asked for. We prayed to God for our child and we got our child. You know, he may not be packaged the way that we thought he was going to be, but he's still a blessing. You know, he's our joy.
Well, I do want to touch on that just a little tiny bit. I know, like you said, that's a whole episode within itself, but how do you feel now, after the losses you experienced, after these challenging pregnancies? Like, what is it like now to have Maxwell? Like, what's your day-to-day like with him as a special needs family?
So our day-to-day, so we are blessed with nursing care. So we do have nursing care at least 10 to 12 hours a day. I mean, it's more like 10 hours a day now. We used to have a 12-hour nurse that was here, but we liked our nurse so much that she cut her hours back for us for some personal reasons. But anyhow, we normally have nurse Monday through Friday, at least 12 hours a day. And that helps us out a lot so that I can go work, that he can go work. Before then, it was all on Brandon. I was pretty much working. I work outside the home. He works in the home. So whenever we don't have nursing care, Brandon is Maxwell's pretty much sole caretaker at that time until I get home, and then we kind of switch off. Yeah. So lots of medications, lots of meds. This time of year is very tricky with kids who have who are premature in general or have any respiratory issues. The change of seasons can get them. So there's just more extra care around that. But it's challenging because when we were in Charlotte and when we had him, we didn't know what to expect. We were like, okay, we have a new baby first and foremost. So having a new baby is one thing, but having a new baby when you know that they are going to have some challenges is a whole different gamut, because that heightens your awareness of the things that they're doing. So when he was younger, 2 or 3 months old, he started to not want to take the bottle, and he was just really fussy. I mean, it was just a really hard time for us. So we ended up finding out that was just a part of his brain injury. That was the reason why he was not being able to take a bottle. So they ended up diagnosing him as failure to thrive, and then he ended up having to have surgery at I think he was about 5 months old, where he had a gastronomy tube placed. So pretty much he's fed through a gastronomy tube, and we had to learn how to care for that and learn how to change it and how to feed him properly through that. So it's been, I would say that we have become more nurse adverse. We are more nursing care parents and more advocates for him, because of course with any child who has a special need or a disability, they don't have a voice for themselves, or just any kids in general, really. You have to be their advocate at all times. So I always say that my husband is Maxwell's largest advocate, because I'm a little bit more lenient on people. Brandon is not. He will shut people down very fast and quick in a hurry. He does not play when it comes to Maxwell, and we shouldn't, So somebody has to be the bad guy, and he prefers to do that job. But no, it's difficult. I think that now we had to relocate from Charlotte back to my hometown in Virginia, the Virginia Beach area of Virginia, to be closer to family, just for the help.
Right.
So we moved back here it's been 2 years now. We've been back home, and it's been a huge blessing to be around family that can be there whenever we are in the hospital, because there's a time when we first moved here, we were in the hospital almost every couple months, it seemed like it, because it was just a transition, and he had to get used to the weather here, and we just had, having that family support that can bring you a dish or let you go home and run and take a shower before you come back to the hospital has been a huge blessing. And then being able to show our family how to care for Maxwell. So when we want to go on a trip together and have that couple time, they're able to do that and not have any worries about it, that, Maxwell's gonna be well taken care of. My family knows how to change his G-tube. They know how to fix his food. They know how to give him all his proper medicines. And if something happens, they know what doctors to call and what hospital to take him to so that he's properly cared for. So moving back home was not my first choice, but it's been a blessing. I will tell you that it's been a blessing, tremendous blessing being around my family. And being closer to his family too, because we're closer to DC, so we're closer to his family, so they can come down and help out as well. So
awesome.
You got anything to add on the special needs front?
No, man. I think it's been. I like to think of it in 3 phases. The first phase was kind of just the normal, typical, family baby phase. He was born, he goes to daycare, and then once the daycare phase ended, when he got the G tubes, then he was home with me, and so I was home with him. I left I was bivocational, pastoring and working in the local school system in Charlotte. So I left the school system job, and I was just pastoring. But during the day, I was with Maxwell, 100% of the time, and that was tough, extremely tough. I just wasn't ready in general. I don't think, just in general, I wasn't wired and just ready mentally and emotionally, and I even think they say spiritually to be the primary caregiver for, my son, a baby. Just in general, I think, traditionally you see mainly the mothers are the primary caregivers for their children, especially at a young age. And that was on me. Then add on top of that, he's differently able. On top of that, learning to all the medicine regimen. Erica was giving him all the medicines early on when I was at work, and then it switched to me. I'll be honest, I just couldn't handle it. It was just too much, too fast, too much. So, hence we moved here, and like she said, it was doctor's appointments almost every week, trying to set up an established care,
right?
Meeting different specialists. And so at the time he was going to a daycare, her godmother owns a daycare. So she took him and she was like, just teach me how to do a G-tube. I'll take care of him. But that lasted maybe 3 or 4 months before he kept getting sick. So we had to take him out of daycare.
And he kept getting sick,
And so I was home with him then I was home with him again. I got a job, and but I was like, you know what? I can't do it because my son just keep
getting sick.
Getting sick.
Yeah, it was just that time of year. Yeah.
And so, I was home for another, maybe after that 3 or 4 months, and then finally we were able to establish to get nurses in the home. And for the first about the first 6 months, we kept switching nurses. We thought we had a good one.
That's why I said that's a whole other podcast.
We had another good one.
Because that is having nursing care is a big, huge issue.
Right. Now we finally have a great one.
We have a great nurse now.
So,
awesome.
I was able to work for some time and end up, some things changed my ministry. So I end up, now I'm just pastoring full time. So I'm flexible, but just as she said, having family close to home. Case in point, last week, I'm having revival at my church. My church is about an hour and a half away from where we live. She was out of town on business. So we had a respiratory nurse at the house, and the nurse had some, concerns about Maxwell. So I was able just to call my mother-in-law, hey, can you go by the house real quick to make sure okay,
Maxwell's good.
Versus me, having to leave and drive, hour plus back, and so just to have that safety net to know, okay, I can call somebody who I feel confident in. I can make sure that my son is doing well, and so it's been just a tremendous blessing. Have some stability, just having the stability. Making sure he's okay and he's stable opens up a lot of other areas in your life where, you can go to work, where you can have a social life. And so more than a blessing to him, it's been a blessing to our whole family.
Our family, yeah.
And then for me, I'm a doctoral student. So now I'm now looking at, what my son has experienced and what we have experienced as a family. Okay, so let me see how I can use this situation and this, this blessing to be a blessing to other families.
Right.
And so by no stretch of imagination is it easy. Some days
parenting's not easy in general.
Yeah, some days probably our biggest arguments are, you give him medicine or you give him medicine.
Yeah.
I feel like giving him medicine.
I think it also just the care that we give him, because like I said, he's attentive and he knows who's around him, but we do have guilt sometimes that we sit him in front of a TV and let him watch TV, especially when he's, when we're in here doing other things. So we're just trying to be more attentive and give him a quality of life that we would want him to have, even if he was a typical child. So, being able to experience those things. So like, my sister and I are making this big, huge costume for him for Halloween. I just, we want to give him those experiences. So I don't want to take that away from him just because he's a little different. That's all.
Right. Okay. So Brandon, through all of the stuff that you guys have been through these past 2 years, what have you learned about your wife in the process?
That's a good one.
He's like, oh, you put me on the spot.
Oprah over here.
Yeah, I know.
What have I learned about my wife in the process?
Anything that surprised you about her?
No, nothing surprising. But what I learned that, and I'm still learning, but what I realized and still learning and accepting is that she needs her time.
Praise God.
As Maxine, the Waters,
Yes.
claiming my time.
Yes.
She does a lot, and she needs her time.
Mm-hmm.
She needs her time just to be by herself.
Amen.
And sometimes I'm not always as go ahead and do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it involves spending money. But she needs that time.
Yeah.
So I've learned that my wife needs her time, just to do her, whatever that is. Do her.
And Erica, what's the biggest? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But she is a wonderful lover and caregiver of our son. She truly loves our son, and it's difficult.
Yeah,
it's a difficult journey.
Yeah.
And sometimes she can be hard on me, and vice versa, because we both want
the best for our son. So
and sometimes it's but it's just a difficult journey. So it's like, well, you do the hard thing this time. You do the hard thing this time.
No, we just need to just do it ourselves.
But she loves our son, but she does need her time. So yeah.
Okay. And Erica, what's the biggest thing that you've learned about your husband in this process of marriage and loss and birth? And
that Brandon, it can truly be a nurturer. Like he said that he struggled with it, and he did, but he was able to, and maybe a lot of men don't have that natural characteristic about them, but when they're faced with the situation where they're kind of forced into it, in our situation we were, because that he was the only option to have, be able to care for Maxwell while I was at work. Mm-hmm. He was able to take that experience and develop a relationship with Maxwell, and they have their own special bond that I don't think they would have had if he wasn't able to be there so early on. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate it about him. He knows Maxwell just as well as I know him because he had that time with him. So I think I've learned that the most, especially with this being a special needs parent, that you are definitely a nurturer.
He's like, I do all right. Erica, I want to piggyback off a post that you shared today where you were asking, what's like the favorite Bible verse or quote that you use to get through. So for you guys, what's your favorite Bible verse that you guys go to when, you have those days where it's just like, oh my gosh, this is too much. We've been through so much. We're still, we're going through a lot here. We're facing different challenges. What's you guys like go-to Bible verse, prayer, quote that you use to like center yourself and get back on track?
The pastor's pulling up the Bible.
I know, I'm waiting for it. I got to take advantage of having a pastor on the podcast here. I'm waiting for a word. I'm trying to catch on myself.
My Bible verse is Romans 8:28. For all things, we know all things work together for the good to them who love God and are called according to his purpose. So that's my verse, because I know in those bad times that we've had, there's going to be some good that comes from it. I may have not seen it at that time, but there has been good that comes from it, because now I get to share with you, you share with me, and then I get to share with a whole bunch of other women their experiences, and it strengthens us. It allows us to heal, and it allows other people to heal when they hear our stories and our testimony. So all things work together for the good, because we're called. We all have a purpose. We all have a purpose. So that's my verse, and that sits with me when I know that something bad is going to happen, or something bad has happened, that there is going to be some good that comes from it. What's your first, sir?
Come on, Pastor.
Turn to your Bible.
I know. I should have. If I knew you were a pastor before we started this, I would have really brought my Bible.
Your Bible out.
I sure would have.
Well, two verses that kind of center me. And the first one is Genesis 1:27. That's the first one that I really rely upon. Genesis 1:27, where it says, "So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him, male and female. He created them." So really, just when I think about creation, and I think about we being created in the image of God, the Imago Dei, and it makes so when I think about Maxwell, I think about no matter how he is, whatever his condition is, he's still created in God's image.
He is.
And he is still a child of God. God loves him just as much as he loves us, and he was not a mistake. He was intentionally created and born the way he was born and created. He's still created in God's image. So that really gives me solace and peace. But it's also driving my thoughts as it relates to, again, my dissertation project, to think about, if we're all creating God's image, what does that mean for children and other adults, people such as Maxwell? Also, I think about Psalm 139.
I'm taking notes, by the way.
So yeah, okay. No, go ahead, take your notes, because he's gonna keep throwing them out at you.
Psalm 139, verse 13 and 14. I'm just trying to find the right version, and I'm sure you've heard it before.
All right. What? Fearfully and wonderfully made.
And basically, as my wife just said, it's for you formed me in my inward parts, you covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works. And again, Maxwell is fearfully and wonderfully made. He is a marvelous work of God. And so, despite what other people may think, or even how I may feel at the moment, he is still created fearfully and wonderfully, and he's a marvelous creation by God. In the book of Genesis, when God finished creating the world and creating man, God said, "It is good." And so I think about Maxwell, you are good. You're good. He has a thumbprint of God upon him, as we all do.
Yeah.
And so even for me, even I think about language. A lot of times we say disabled, and our parents would say differently able. To say disabled, this is is a prefix that means something's bad, something's wrong. But he's differently able, and so he just has different abilities than we do. He has a beautiful smile, beautiful soul. I guarantee, as a pastor, I'm a part of Connectional Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and so our denomination has churches all over the world. However, when I go to meetings, and whether it be in DC and North Carolina, people ask me, "How's Maxwell?" They don't ask how I am. How's Maxwell doing?
They know.
I saw that picture of Maxwell, and so people know our son. They know his story. They know his smile. They love him, and so he has his own ministry in his own way. And I'm excited to see what God's going to do with him, how God's going to use him, how he's going to grow and develop. But he's loved and he's a light. And I want to make the world, and especially again in my profession, the church, a more inclusive and more welcoming space and place for him.
Awesome.
I love that.
I do too.
All right, McAfees, thank you so much. This was amazing. I learned a lot about you guys. I'm sure everyone watching can relate to your story in some kind of way. I hope they write down these Bible verses too, so they can rely on them when they're having a hard time. But I just want to thank you guys for being so open and sharing your story. I know it's not easy. So just thank you so much. And I know somebody's going to be very touched by you guys, by your story, and by Maxwell. And, you know, I see he has like his Instagram and he has his like cute outfits, and he's just out here all over the place living life. And, you know, I don't have a special needs child, but I do appreciate seeing that, because it gives like a different perspective on what it means to have a child that's differently abled. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about it. I see you guys out with him, and he's out here, he's going to parties, he's, you know, dressed down to the nines and everything. I'm just like, wow, like, you know, look at him. I can see how much he's loved. I can see how well taken care of he is. And, you know, I just really want to commend you guys for keeping God first and just being amazing parents and sticking together despite these losses. Because like I said, I've met so many couples who've unfortunately divorced after baby loss, because it's hard. So kudos to you guys. Thank you again. Is there anything you want to say before you guys go, or that's it?
I would just say, if you are in the Hampton Roads area, feel free to visit us at Gaskins Chapel AME Church, and that's on the Eastern Shore of Virginia. But also, you can follow us on social at Gaskins Chapel AME, or Brandon McAfee. That's Instagram and Facebook. And one of the things that we're striving to do, starting December, definitely starting in 2018, is create a space, a service in the Chesapeake, Norfolk area for families such as ours, who unfortunately there are a lot of families who feel uncomfortable for whatever reason going to church with their child, or who may be differently able. There are a lot of churches for whatever reason that aren't always as welcoming to families as such. So we want to create a space and a place where no matter how quote unquote loud or distractive people may think your child is, where we welcome you, we love you, we want you to bring your child and your family to our church. We want to make sure that not only you, the parents and the family, can still have a work out their relationship with God, but we want to make sure that the children or the adults can experience God in their own unique way. And so feel free to, again, to check us out social, whether we Facebook and Instagram at Brandon O. McAfee or Gaskins Chapel AME.
And you can find me on social at Erica and McAfee on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yes, and listen to her podcast, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and I'll be sure to link all of you guys stuff in the description and all that, so everyone can find you. But again, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's watching the video. Thank you to everyone who's listening on SoundCloud. And that is it for episode 11 of Baby Loss Talk. Thank you. Bye.